Hey everyone, I'm Michelene Wilkerson, founder of Michelene & Co., where I work at the intersection of tech, community, and culture. For today's convo, we're hashing out how folks can grow and succeed in tech, both as operators and founders. And today I'm so fortunate to be joined by Yari Blanco, head of multicultural partnerships at Twitter, Suezette Robotham, founder of the Hire and Hire Group, previously VP of DEI at Gartner, and leading DEI at Google before, and Chen, founder and CEO at Kairos. Also, to get everyone presenting their best selves, Poise is an AI-powered communication coach that elevates your executive presence in presentations, interviews, customer calls, etc. And Poise is completely free to use, but we're excited to offer Next Summit participants 20% off their pro plan using the code Worklife. So welcome everyone. We're so excited to just have you all today. And I guess to just quickly, before jumping into the questions I have, I would love to just get a sense of you just diving into what your roles are, what you're doing right now at this moment.
All right, I'll go first. Hello, everyone. My name is Katie. I'm currently the CEO and co-founder of Kairos. We're an NFT company. Like ourselves, we do everything to help creators, brands get into the NFT world, from creation to launching to getting NFTs in customers' hands. So, yeah.
Susan, how about you? And also, so sorry, Robotham.
It's okay.
You almost had it.
It's okay. I was going to correct it eventually. It's my good, strong Jamaican last name. And in terms of what I'm doing, I'm actually doing something that my ancestors wanted for me, which is I'm actually resting. So I am currently on a career break, which will end in 2 weeks. So I need to actually get my sleep schedule back on an adult cadence, because I'm currently sleeping like a newborn infant. But I've just given myself a period of rest this summer, which has been very necessary, considering I've been working since I was 14 and I am 40. So excited to rest, excited for this conversation.
I love that. Well, I'll jump in. I am Yari Blanco, as Michelene said, and I lead multicultural partnerships at Twitter. I work across TV, film, and music. And I was also the founder of the Girl Mob, which was a collective that unified and brought together women of color through digital content and also IRL events.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, and for just giving folks context into who you are and what you're doing. And I wanted to kick off this conversation really just diving into what's happening, across the world right now. And right now, today's landscape is really unique. We have a pending recession that's looming over everyone's head like a dark cloud. Industries are slowing down dramatically, and even the big 5 tech companies are slowing down hiring, and many more even laying off folks. So I guess my first question is what do you think it takes to stand out in tech today versus in previous years?
What a question. The first thing that comes to mind is multi-layered. We've not just, if we look at the recession and isolation, it's kind of not the clear picture. There's the pandemic, and then we have the quiet quitting or the great resignation, and then we have this recession. So I think in the context of things that I think people off the back of recession are really realizing that how they want to live and work, not just to purely work. I feel like the period of just tech and work is life, and we live with our coworkers, and we're all family, that I think 2019 was where you see a really clear break. Now people are demanding more and respect. I would say respecting themselves to be who am I going to be in connection with work? And so for us as a young company, especially recently making hires, and going through so many candidates, we realized we really needed to have that together in order to appeal to candidates. Like as a young startup, to even be thinking about, all right, what is our, maternity leave policy? Which I think startups a couple of years ago, that I don't know if many of them would be thinking about that. But for us, it's thinking through everything, our benefits, all of that, in order to even stand out and compete, especially in a market where people are looking for stability and we're a startup. So that's my perspective.
And I think that's a really great point that you bring up as well. And it's something that you just said that resonated was, like being the whole self. And, and I think you gave a really great perspective on, what it takes to stand out as a company, because now at this point, it's not enough to say, hey, we're a tech company, come work for us. We have a vending machine with snacks and we give beer at the end of the day. So come join us just for that reason. But it really takes like some truly deep intentionality to make people stick around. And I'm also curious if anyone has like thoughts on maybe on like the employee side, what it takes to, really just like stand out in a hard time.
I will say, like, I'll jump in. So standing out, I feel like goes back to that mentality of like, oh my God, of like scarcity, of like, how do I keep, how am I high performing? How do I keep this job? And so for me, I don't come from tech. It's not my background. It was never something that I was like looking to do. It just happened to be like right moment, right time type of situation where I got into Twitter. And for me, I think this conversation can be different for people who are just starting out, right? Like you really want to stand out. If someone's a little more mid-management or like upper level management, they've already established themselves a little bit. So it's just like a different conversation versus someone that is, the CEO of the company, right? So I would say like for someone that's starting out, I'm thinking of folks that are like associate levels or coordinators that are coming in that I've worked within the team that I'm on. I'm always like, make sure that you come up with something that's uniquely you, that you feel passionate about, whether that's like a newsletter that you do bi-weekly that goes out to the company or to the team, or, you're jumping in to be like, hey, can I help you with this recap? Like some of these things, like I started my career 16 years ago and they still stand true. Like raising your hand to like help somebody will always keep you top of mind, because it's like, oh, this person, one, they're paying attention to what's going on across the team, but two, they have an interest to learn, right? And to be helpful. And so I think that will always keep you top of mind for folks. And the opposite is true. If you're just kind of like, I'm just doing like the job that I was hired to do, then you're not going to be picked to be part of like projects or to like help with certain things. So I think just like picking the thing that you feel most excited by, even if in your head you're like, oh, I don't know if this is like really moving the needle. Again, if you're starting out, as someone that's more like middle management, I would say something that I've done is really like owning some of my superpowers. So for me, is like I'm bilingual, so I speak English and Spanish. So like I work within music, and so immediately I was like, how do I make my mark at the company within Latin music to make sure that those artists are getting the support that they need from Twitter, but also that like I'm uniquely positioning myself that I have those relationships with those companies and with talent and with management and with publicists. So I think, again, figuring out like your niche, but also the thing that you love to do is a really good way to be able to like differentiate yourself from your colleagues.
And don't play with Jody. Jody was just at Billboard yesterday leading, a pretty massive event. So, you're getting all the gems from the pro herself. So that I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this topic, especially because you've been in higher, you've been in like super high levels as well. I'm curious like what your thoughts are, especially from a talent acquisition standpoint, for higher level folks who are transitioning into tech.
So I think it's the intersection of what both Katie and Yari have mentioned, right? It's one, like really being clear on your purpose, but then not being afraid to be an expert, right? So I think a lot of times, especially in spaces like tech, you have millions of Swedes or software engineers, to make sure I'm not getting too acronym-y. That is the one thing about tech. You start speaking in abbreviations and acronyms very quickly, and they all mean different things in different places, right? But not being afraid to be an expert, because in owning your niche, you become the go-to for specific things, right? But it's also making sure that you're becoming an expert in a space that you're actually, to Yari's point, very passionate about and committed to, and it feels like it's a purpose alignment, right? So if I even look at myself, right, I tell people my major is talent acquisition, but my discipline is diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And so I've managed to carve out a niche within the talent acquisition space to become an expert in how we really think about building out diversity recruiting strategies. And it's something that I'm passionate about because my life has been committed to creating access and opportunity for others, right? Because the other most important piece about it is it's insufficient to be an expert and to be doing purpose-driven work that you don't actually have a narrative about, right? So it's how do you craft the conversation and tell the story of not only the niche that you're the expert in, but why you do that work and how you'll continue to bring and add value to what a company's bottom line is.
So 3 things I'm getting from what all of you are saying is bringing your whole self and all the pieces that make up like this whole that is you. Also at the same time, you know, just like owning your expertise, and especially as people of color, being able to own that, especially in spaces where, you know, everyone in the room may not look like us. Or even if you are, you know, regardless of your background, we can all be minorities in a room. Whether it be from our background experience, not just limited to demographic factors, you know, and then also just like being able to translate that into something results driven. And I guess like piggybacking off of something that Jody said, you know, you're mentioning obviously quiet quitting, and Katie, you were mentioning this as well. There's this tension between, you know, just showing up for the job because so many people feel their jobs are not rewarding them, valuing them, even if they do crush their soul to do the work. But then how do you balance rest, this idea of rest and taking care of yourself, you know, and rocket shipping all the way? Is there a balance? And that's fine if there's not a balance either. Or maybe it comes down to just like committing to what moves you intellectually, energetically, and even socially in terms of like teams as well. Curious.
I have a lot of feelings about this. I think first and foremost, where you live really makes a difference. In the US, I literally was just talking about this on my social media. In the US, we're so driven by output. And if you live in cities like New York City, as someone that's a native New Yorker, this is just like the hustle is real. If you don't have 10 jobs, if you're not doing 20 creative projects, and that is bananas. So I'm so happy to see, especially Gen Z, talk more about like, I am not just like a machine that's just meant to put out, to just have this much output. I really wish we would, you know, the Europeans have done a lot of things that we don't like, but the one thing that I wish we would adapt from them is the idea of like this work-life balance, right? Like in certain countries in Europe, you're not allowed to email people past a certain hour. You know, people go on vacation like in August, the whole month. And so like, we don't have that. I don't want to call it a luxury because it's like, we're not put on this earth to just be machines that have so much output. So I think in the US, it really matters how good you are at creating your own boundaries. And again, I think specifically for me as someone that comes from entertainment in New York City, that's really hard, right? Because in New York, everything is like, I needed it yesterday. So if you yourself don't have boundaries with yourself outside of work, with like your family, with your friends, with yourself, then it's really, really hard to have those boundaries at work and to be able to say no to projects that you don't have the bandwidth for, or to tell people like, hey, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be going on vacation. Like I'm out. However you want to, you know, voice that. But like, those are things that we're not taught. Here in the US, it's like, you're only as good as like your next project. Like we don't even celebrate the wins. Like think about that kind of stuff. So I really do think that from an individual level, it starts at like our own boundaries with self and with like our own interpersonal relationships. And then us talking about it in spaces like this with our friends and encouraging each other. And so that kind of like spreads and echoes. And then hopefully companies start to listen. So like, I'm really proud that Twitter during the pandemic, and they've continued this now, and it's a company policy, once a month, every Monday, one Monday of every month, we get off. And so we get a long weekend and it's called a day of rest. And so the company shuts down and everybody's like on our away messages, like it's a day of rest for the company and no one's responding to your emails. So I know that we could do more, but I do think that it requires a certain level of boundaries and to like upkeep those boundaries because people are very quick to overstep that.
And a question, and that's so cool that Twitter is like moving into a 4-day work week. That's so fascinating. Or it seems like they're moving into like a 4-day work
Well,
week.
at least one week of the month. I don't want to talk about. I'm not on the people team, so you know, just in case. But
All
you
good.
know, like that's so important. Like one of my friends works at Spotify, and yesterday she was like, "Oh my God, during this week, people are gonna lose their mind." And I'm like, "Why?" I'm like, "Are you guys launching something?" And she's like, "No, it's gonna be a wellness week for the company. It's a company-wide wellness week, and we're all gonna be. I don't know if they're all gonna be off like on their own, or they're gonna be doing like company wellness related things." But I'm like, yes, like we need more companies to do this because if we leave it to like the US government, that's not going to be the case. Like there's not, those kind of regulations are just not going to happen as quickly as we need them. So I don't mean to rant.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're totally good. And I guess like a follow-up question that I have, on this topic of like balancing rest and ambition. And I'll direct this both at Katie and Suezette for this one is, do you think high performance is being redefined during this time? And if so, like, what do you think the new rules of high performance looks like? Because you have right now in this moment, you have the fears, the economic fears kind of like making people worried. But then there's this call for rest at the same time. So it's this interesting tension that's happening where it's like, actually, we need to perform more than before, because I think it was Google CEO who said, we're going to have some hard days. I think he said the sunny days are kind of over. That's not verbatim, but essentially that was his message, that we are stepping into a harder time. So what does that look like to perform highly, especially when you're new into the space and trying to, both new in tech and new in your company, and trying to build your individual brand, and also I guess like your career brand. Yeah.
So I have a couple of reactions to it, right? I think, and not even I think, I know that the tone that leadership sets with rest, about rest, sets the tone for a team or organization, right? And so as a leader, as a manager, one of the things that I prioritize for my team, just as we at the beginning of the year set OKRs, right? So we're setting our goals, we're setting our key priorities and agendas. I very much tell my team at the beginning of every quarter, I also want to see you put PTO and time off in the calendar at the same time, right? So that we're having active conversations around here's where the work is, but here's where your also opportunities for breaks and rest live, and making sure, especially in larger team meetings, that reaffirmed, hey, like you all should be taking time off. What is the time that you need? Because at the end of the day, you can't be high performing and functioning broken and tired. I need people at their best, and you're only at your best when I've also emphasized that to be a whole person, that you use it or lose it anyway. So even at my last company, we only carried 10 days over, that you prioritizing time off is really essential and important to me as your leader. And making sure, even as I managed up to my own manager, that my time off and any time that I'd be out of office was also prioritized in my weekly agenda and in the conversations, so that it's not this separate thing on the side, it's a part of how we function and think about us as a team. But when I think about productivity, right, I think a lot of that is also how are you bringing your team along the journey, right? And so again, another element of leadership is how are you actually really anchoring and helping your team to understand what the goals and priorities are and what their role and responsibility is in achieving those things, so that folks, one, understand how they help to drive the bottom line and what their contributions need to be, but then also, right, to that broader sense of, and this is how we build in breaks, and this is how we think about rest. That's a part of the conversation. I think a lot of times goals are set in some quiet black box somewhere, and then they come back to the team and people are like, I don't even know how to get to that. As opposed to, for instance, what I do with my leaders very critically is, let's set our goals and objectives together. Let's make sure that it makes sense. Let's pressure test it. Let's go back to my boss and make sure these goals make sense. And then, right, like as we're checking in on these goals on a regular basis and cadence, if they don't make sense, let's not be afraid to revise and talk about why the goals need to be revised, or let's talk about what goals must stay and why they must stay and what we need to do to revert. But I think the challenge with productivity in the conversation that we're having is there's a lack of accountability around manager accountability. There's a lack of a conversation around like how are managers actually really leading and guiding their teams and showing up as leaders and not just managers. And so there's a whole conversation that I'm about to swirl out on about it, but productivity in a vault is not productivity at all. And so I think there's a broader conversation we have to need to have about people and productivity, and not just productivity by itself.
Yeah, and what I'm getting from that is it's not just solely on the individual, especially as they're transitioning into tech, to be totally responsible for whether they boom or bust. It's also the responsibility of the companies to make sure that everyone in the organization is aligned, moving in such a way where people are not burning out constantly, et cetera. And that also contributes to the individual thriving as they transition, being clear, communicating. And Katie, I want to ask you a very direct question, particularly since you're a founder. And I'm really curious, how do you navigate starting up as a founder in this time? Because I'm sure there's some aspiring founders. There are folks like commenting in the lobby chat who have just started businesses or are thinking about starting a business. What was that leap like for you?
Yeah, before I dive into that, I just want to, as Suezette was talking, I'm typing up notes because I'm going through that exact phase. And I wrote, goals and objectives help people know what they're supposed to do, what they're aiming for, and help people define productivity. And I think that's so important. So how my journey so far was, since, when we first had the idea and start building product, fundraise, all of that, sprinting all the way up to September, I lived and breathed every moment of just product market fit. Oh my God, the runway, setting up benefits, getting everything, goals, building product, taking as many calls as I can to learn. And it just felt like everything was a whirlwind. And I could feel myself losing, not feeling like I could access my superpowers. Things just felt harder. And the first thing first thing I noticed was I'm getting out of bed later than I normally do. And normally when I get out of bed and I'm really jazzed about doing anything, I'm like spring out, done. And I'm dragging my feet a bit. And I think it's like paying that attention. My partner was like, I think it's time to take a break. And so I'm like, I can't take a break. We have to plan where the break is. I have to, set up my team, set expectations, all of that. And I just came back from that break and it's incredible. All the things that felt like were like bricks. I was just banging my head against a wall. Everything felt so opaque. Suddenly I had clarity, because for a week, I didn't think about all the things that I've been thinking about day and night for the last 9 months. And just being able to step away from it, I came back, I wrote a reflection on our business. I sent it to the team. This is what's working. This is what's not working. This is where the opportunities are. And then I spent the next week emailing as many people as I can on LinkedIn to try and see where my gut feeling is, how much is that matching with where I think product market fit is. And my team's like, you're on fire. And I was like, I took a break. That's what it is.
Can we have a moment of appreciation just for, oh my God, the runway? I think that's a quote that probably happens with every founder at least several times a week. Oh my God, the runway. Let's make it a meme. Let's go viral, y'all.
But also you have what I realized, my anxiety around just personal money. And now you're founding, looking at the runway, you're passing that anxiety to the rest of the team. And I've had, advisors like, Katie, you are panicking about a bill or a piece of, homework that's due for a while. Right now, this is not the behavior. This is not the time to be worried about that. But so something for founders on the call, it's You know, sometimes it is important to ask like your relationship with money and potentially how that's translating to how you're perceiving your runway, because ultimately as a leader, people can feel that anxiety and it does impact like their sense of focus or, you know, how they should
Operate.
it's operate. Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's a great point, because what I hear from that as well is dealing with yourself. And that's part of the thriving, dealing with your own inner mess, dealing with your own inner chaos, whether, you know, I mean, we all pick up things before we come to work. And I think sometimes work and personal life can be separated so drastically. But really all of those things show up. So dealing with yourself, you know, not only helps you to be a better leader, but it also helps the people around you to show up as their best selves. Because if you don't show up as your best self, you're at the highest level, it trickles down. And especially in a smaller company where, you know, your earliest employees really feel that on a day-to-day level. And I guess like just very quickly, Katie, in like one sentence or like a couple sentences, like what would be your advice to first-time founders or people thinking about starting up? Like how should they prepare for that mentally, emotionally, spiritually, etc.?
In one sentence, I don't know if I could do that.
Okay, we can let it go for like a couple sentences.
I would just say like, you know, check whether you're an optimist first, because of this is a recession like coming up. And the thing the story I tell myself is if you can make it through a recession, if you could like thrive a little bit, not like full thrive, but thrive a little bit, you've got something. This is the ultimate test. And so as an optimist, I'm like, yeah, bring it on. Like let's figure out if I could be a cockroach and survive this, like the future is fine. So yeah, that would be the advice. Check if you're an optimist or you have the support around you to keep that like resilience. Because a lot of times we get told resilience from inside. No, you need a support team, right? And you need to like check yourself. I think that's one of the takeaways, check yourself. Because the other thing is if you don't figure it out, you end up working out on your team and they don't deserve that. No one should be doing the emotional labor of, you know, you figuring it out. So, you know, yeah, I would just especially going to like right now in this juncture of we have unstable market conditions. And but again, it's huge, it's an opportunity as well.
Yeah. And you know, and I check yourself. I just imagine a mat at the door, check yourself at the door before stepping into this space or this company. I see lots of tweets. I see merch. I see really good things coming from this conversation. And I guess second to last question I have for you all, and I think this is something that's relevant to all of you. So would love to do like a quick go around of all your thoughts on this is how do you overcome the imposter syndrome when you make the leap, the transition, or continue climbing higher? Because especially the higher you climb, the lonelier it gets. Founders, you know, can be such a very lonely, very unique experience. The higher you climb in, whether it be a startup or a corporation, the lonelier it gets as well. So what keeps you grounded and not caving to imposter syndrome, if that's something that you've experienced? I'm not, you know, placing that on everyone, but just curious.
I was going to say, I don't get imposter syndrome, and people look at me in shock when I say that. But at this point in my journey, and this point in my career, and this point in my life, and this point of who I am as a woman, a Black woman, I have the skill set, the ability, the talent, the experience that has put me in every single seat I am. And organizations are just as blessed to have me as I am to be in that seat. Because I get very cautious around titles, because I think sometimes we very quickly want to be like, oh my gosh, I have imposter syndrome. And we take onus off of the organization for the fact that they may not actually be creating a culture or have a culture that is open and inclusive to all types of styles and all types of ways of being. And so I like to hold up the mirror and be like, are you an imposter or are you just new trying to learn, right? Like, can't there be a learning phase? Isn't there an opportunity for you to really build a fundamental understanding of where you are without needing to be labeled an imposter? And if a culture is perpetuating the idea that you have to feel like an outsider before you belong, then what is it about that culture that needs to change in order for everyone to feel welcome to learn and grow and develop and thrive at the company organization?
You got the poetry snaps on that one, Suzette. Jari, what about you? We haven't heard from you.
All the points is that I think for me, I would say 95% of the time, I'm like, good. Everything what Suzette just said is like, you guys, y'all hire me. I know you Googled me before you hired me, whether it's for a full-time job or a conversation like this. Like, I know you did your research on me, so like, you know what you're getting, you know what you're walking into. You're gonna get the door knockers, you're gonna get the bright nails, you're gonna get the outspoken person. That's just who I am. So 95% of the time I'm good. I will say the other 5%, it shows up in two ways. One is when I am the only like brown person in the room, and I'm like, and as a woman, I'm like, I'm bringing all the people with me. And so like, there is like a self-imposed pressure to make sure that the work that I'm setting up or the way that I'm showing up is creating space for other people that are trying to get in the room. So I don't know if that's imposter syndrome so much as like the self-imposed pressure of like showing up. And then the second way is when I'm invited into certain rooms again, or into certain conversations with folks. And I think what Suezette said about titles, where I'm like, oh man, like these people are so far ahead into their career versus me, even though I have, 15 years in my career. And what I've noticed recently, because this came up for me recently, I'm doing a leadership course that the CMO at the company chose me and 3 other women at the company to be a part of. Is I was like, something I've learned like in the last few years that I've just become it's been very potent for me is like, you're always a teacher and you're always a student. And so like, just because I'm younger than somebody, even though I have the 15 years, they might have 20, they might have 30, it doesn't mean that they don't have things that they can learn from me, whether that's like my point of view on something, fresh eyes on something, my lived experience, whatever that is. So now I remind myself a little bit more about that. Anytime that like that bubbles up just that little bit. And I'm like, oh yeah, I totally have something to offer here, no matter what the room looks like, And so I hope that's helpful for people, because a lot of times we think that we don't have something to offer, but again, you're always a teacher and a student, and you just get to play both sides.
Katie.
I just wrote that down. I'm learning so much from this panel. Like, I have all these notes, just so you guys know I'm not playing a game on the side or something. I love it. So for me, I've spent the majority of my career being a graphic designer, then becoming a digital product designer, and now I have this title called CEO. And imposter syndrome is very real for me now, because people are like, what do you do? And I'm like, I am a designer. And then in that moment, I always feel like I'll go one way or the other. And so yeah, I'm still getting used to saying I'm the co-founder, CEO of a company. And part of it is like reminding myself that I've worked with a lot of people, and one of the things is like, no one really knows what they're doing, but everybody has like the foundation to figure it out, right? That's what I appreciate. And so when I remind myself that, like lately, I've just been really reading as much as I can from everything about product management. I was just like, I've worked with really great product managers. I know what the general gist is like. Am I missing anything? Because I have a very clear problem I want to solve here. Like, what else haven't I seen as a designer absorbing from the side versus like books or blogs or newsletters people have written? And so that's part of me battling my imposter syndrome, is just like study up, ask questions, and like reach out to like my investors, my advisors, just be like, I don't know how to do this. And just be very open and like vulnerable in those moments. But also like, if I don't ask, I'm going to end up wasting my time. And I'm going to put my company and my team, in a bad position. So yeah, it's just like really leaning into like, I don't know, and I'll figure it out. But just put myself out there and see who would help me. And that's been, I guess, a way of battling imposter syndrome, just lean into it.
And what I love about what all three of you, even though you all said it in different ways, continuous learning, continuous growth is a major theme of what all of you said. And it's something that has prepared you for the levels and the mountains that you all still continue to climb. So it's not, and I think particularly, Jody and Suezette, who, were mentioning that imposter syndrome is not a factor and how they view their work, how they view themselves, or just an experience that they have anymore. Learning gives you the confidence to break free from all of that. So you're doing the work, both internally and doing the work to level up on the skills, and whether it be like making new connections and doing the work that you need to do to be at the level that you're at. So I think that's a really important key point to drive home. It's not just, I don't have imposter syndrome, it's I'm doing the work. And this now creates a secure base inside of me where I can transition and thrive anywhere. And I just got a message that we're supposed to wrap here. We're a little bit over time, but this was the midday or early morning or night, depending on where in the world you are, conversation I think we all needed. And I just want to thank you all so much for this wonderful conversation. So be sure to stick around for the rest of the events today, everyone. We actually have a community co-working break right after this. So be sure to grab the link to Flow Club co-working lounge, either from the event session description, the lobby chat, or if there's someone on the team here who can drop in the co-working lounge link and we can jump into that. So join us, listen to some chill hop and join other hustlers getting their work done. You can stay in touch with Worklife on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Worklife VC, and also again, you have a free resource to sharpen your communication. So don't forget to tap into Poise and utilize your 20% off discount perks for the audience by using the code WORKLIFE. Thank you so much, everyone. And I guess we will catch you in the Flow Club Lounge. And thank you all, Jody, Katie, Suezette. This was such a wonderful conversation. And a special thank you to our Zoom audience for sticking with us. So we'll catch you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.